This is not just a story, it's a journey into the unknown. A journey that will test your courage and haunt your thoughts long after the video ends. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself. The night is waiting, and once you begin listening, there is no way back. Let the story begin. The night was silent, heavy with an unnatural stillness, as if the world had stopped breathing. In a small, forgotten town hidden deep within the woods, there stood an old house with broken windows and creaking doors, a place where even the wind seemed too afraid to whisper. The townspeople never went near it after dark, for they believed it was cursed. They spoke of shadows moving inside, of whispers that called your name even when you were alone. A man named Raghav, tired from his endless city life, arrived in this town one evening, looking for a quiet escape. He rented a room in a lodge not far from the abandoned house. The innkeeper, an old woman with trembling hands, warned him never to go out at night, especially near the forest in that house. But he laughed it off, thinking it was just another village tale meant to frighten strangers. Yet as darkness fell, he began to feel a strange weight in the air, as though the night itself was watching him. Unable to sleep, Raghav stepped outside, drawn by the cool breeze and the eerie glow of the full moon. The streets were empty, and the silence was so deep that the sound of his own footsteps felt too loud. He wandered further until he saw the house the innkeeper had mentioned. It stood at the edge of the forest, its dark silhouette against the moonlight looking like a beast waiting to devour anyone who dared approach. As he neared the gate, the rusty iron groaned open on its own. A chill ran through him, but a strange curiosity pushed him forward. The wooden floor creaked under his steps, dust rising like ghosts disturbed from their rest. He could smell something old, something rotten, as if time had died here. He pulled out his phone for light, but the moment he stepped inside, the screen flickered and died, leaving him in darkness. Then he heard it, a faint sound, like someone breathing just behind him. He turned, but no one was there. The sound grew louder, closer, as if circling him, but every time he moved, it stopped. His heart pounded as he tried to leave, but the front door, which had been open, was now shut tight. He pushed and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. Panic rose in his chest. Then he saw movement at the top of the staircase, a shadow, tall and twisted, its limbs unnaturally long, crawling on all fours as if it were imitating something human, but failing horribly. The shadow vanished into a room upstairs. Something in Raghav told him to run, but his legs carried him up the stairs as if he were being pulled by invisible strings. Every step groaned like a dying scream. The hallway was dark, the doors closed, but he heard whispers from behind them, voices calling his name in tones that weren't quite human, as though something was trying to mimic a voice but couldn't get it right. One of the doors opened on its own, slow and creaking. Inside was a room frozen in time, a broken crib, a rocking chair moving slightly though no one sat in it, and a shattered mirror on the wall. In the mirror's fragments, he didn't see his reflection but something else, something with hollow eyes and a wide grin, standing right behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. The temperature dropped suddenly, his breath visible in the air. The whispers grew louder, merging into an inhuman scream that shook the walls. He ran from the room, but the hallway stretched endlessly, every door looking the same, every corner looping back. He realized with horror that the house was changing, twisting, trapping him inside a maze of nightmares. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. He saw a figure at the end of the hall, a woman in a torn white dress, her head bent at an unnatural angle, her hair falling like black rivers. She moved toward him without lifting her feet, gliding silently. Her face was pale and lifeless, but when she lifted her head, her mouth opened wide, wider than humanly possible, and a guttural sound escaped, like 100 voices screaming in pain. Raghav ran into another room and slammed the door. He leaned against it, gasping, but then he felt cold fingers on his shoulder. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head, and there she was, standing behind him, her face inches away, her hollow eyes staring into his soul. The lights flickered, and in that flash, her face changed, rotting flesh, worms crawling out of her cheeks, and her jaw unhinged as if ready to swallow him whole. The next moment, he was falling. The floor beneath him collapsed, and he plunged into darkness. When he opened his eyes, he was in a basement filled with broken toys, torn dolls with missing eyes, and walls covered in handprints, small and bloody. A faint child's laughter echoed, distant yet everywhere. He moved slowly, trying not to make a sound, but something was crawling in the shadows, watching him. Then he saw them. Children, pale, lifeless, their eyes black and empty, standing in a circle. They pointed at him without moving their lips, but their voices filled his head, whispering, screaming, chanting his name. He tried to back away, but the ground was sticky, like he was stepping in blood. One of the children stepped forward, her neck twisted, her mouth sewn shut, yet a voice came from her saying, "You shouldn't have come here. You belong to the house now." Suddenly, the walls began closing in, the ceiling dripping with black liquid that hissed when it touched the ground. He scrambled to find a way out and saw a narrow door. He ran through it, but instead of freedom, he found himself back at the staircase again, as if the house had swallowed him whole and was spitting him into its nightmares again and again. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning. Each room he entered was worse than the last. A room with chairs facing the wall, all rocking at once. A kitchen where knives floated in the air, moving like they were alive. And a hallway where shadows hung from the ceiling like corpses. He began to lose his mind. The whispers started to sound familiar, like his own voice calling from the darkness. The shadow figure from earlier returned, but now there were more, crawling on the walls and ceiling, their movements jerky and unnatural, like broken puppets pulled by invisible strings. Finally, he saw an open window and ran toward it. Just as he reached it, something grabbed his leg, cold and slimy, pulling him back. He kicked and screamed, but the darkness pulled harder. In that final moment, he looked out the window and saw the town, peaceful and quiet, as if nothing was wrong. He screamed for help, but no one could hear. And then, silence. The house swallowed him completely, his screams fading into the walls. The next morning, the innkeeper saw his room empty. his belongings untouched, and she knew another soul had been claimed. The house stood there as always, silent, waiting for the next curious visitor. And when the night falls, if you listen closely, you can still hear Raghav's screams carried by the wind. The night was heavy with mist, a pale fog creeping over the forest like silent fingers reaching for anything alive. In the middle of that forest lay an abandoned sanatorium, a place where even the bravest hunters refused to tread after sunset. It was said that the walls of that building still carried the cries of those who died there, patients who vanished without a trace when the institution suddenly closed decades ago. But a young journalist named Mira arrived in the nearby village one rainy evening. She was chasing a story about the sanatorium, drawn by old records of disappearances and mysterious deaths that no one had ever explained. Locals stared at her with a mixture of pity and fear when she mentioned the place. An old man at the tea shop whispered, "If you value your soul, child, do not go near that building at night. It does not let people leave." But Mira, stubborn and fearless, laughed nervously. She wanted truth, no matter how dark that be why nightfall. She stood at the entrance of the forest, her torchlight barely cutting through the fog. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like blood. Every step on the wet ground seemed too loud, as if the forest itself was warning her to turn back. After an hour of walking, the silhouette of the sanatorium appeared. Its cracked walls loomed like a skeletal giant, the windows shattered and hollow, like empty eyes watching her approach. The heavy iron gates groaned as she pushed them open. Immediately, an icy chill ran through her, though the night was not cold. She ignored it and stepped inside. The main hall stretched endlessly, dust covering the floor like snow, with broken gurneys and rusty wheelchairs scattered around. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling, swinging slowly, though there was no wind. Her flashlight flickered. She started recording notes on her voice recorder, but then she heard it, a faint sound, like footsteps above her. At first, she thought it was an animal, but the steps were too slow, deliberate. Her breath quickened. She called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" No reply. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Determined, she moved deeper into the sanatorium. The smell grew worse, mildew mixed with something rotten. She reached a corridor lined with doors, each one marked with peeling paint. Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3. She peeked into one room and froze. Inside, the walls were covered with scratch marks, as if someone had clawed at them for years trying to escape. On the floor lay an old patient's uniform, torn and stained with something dark. Suddenly, her recorder clicked on by itself and played back a voice that wasn't hers. A whisper, faint yet clear, "Leave before it finds you." Her heart pounded. She dropped the recorder, her hands trembling. Then came a sound from behind her, wheels turning slowly. She turned and saw a wheelchair moving on its own, rolling toward her even though the floor was uneven. It stopped just inches away. She felt a cold breath on her neck, as though someone stood behind her. But when she spun around, no one was there. Mira tried to leave, but the corridor had changed. The entrance she had come from was gone. Doors stretched endlessly, and the hallway seemed longer than before. Panic gripped her chest. She picked a random door and entered. The room was a surgery chamber, the kind where operations were done long ago. Rusty scalpels and broken glass lay scattered. A single operating table stood in the center, and on it there was a dark stain. As she stepped closer, she saw something horrifying. Handprints pressed into the metal surface, deep as if burned there. Then, from the corner, a figure rose. A doctor, or what used to be one, his face hidden under a cracked mask, his body twitching unnaturally. He turned his head toward her, and though his eyes were hidden, she felt his gaze pierce through her. He raised a scalpel, not running, not chasing, just walking slowly, each step echoing like a death knell. She backed away, but the floor seemed to melt under her feet, sticky, as if pulling her down. She ran, her torch flickering wildly, the corridors shifting again, leading her deeper instead of out. Every wall she touched felt alive, pulsing as if the building itself had veins and blood. Then she heard it, whispers of hundreds of voices. Some were crying, some laughing hysterically, some begging for help. The voices surrounded her, filling her head until she screamed. She found a staircase and stumbled down into the basement. It was worse there. Rusty chains hung from the ceiling, and the ground was wet. She shone her light ahead and froze. Dozens of figures stood in the shadows, patients with hollow eyes, their mouths open but no sound coming out. They all turned their heads toward her at once. One of them stepped forward, a woman with a shaven head and a crooked neck. Her voice was like a broken tape, crackling and warped. "You shouldn't be here. We never left." Before Mira could move, the figures rushed forward, their movements jerky and unnatural. She screamed and ran back up, but the staircase twisted into a spiral that led nowhere. No matter where she turned, the building trapped her like a maze. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes, until she saw a door with faint light behind it. She pushed it open and found herself back in the forest. She didn't stop to question how. She ran until her legs gave out. The next morning, villagers found her lying unconscious near the road. When she woke, her hair had turned streaks of white, and she couldn't stop shaking. She left the village that same day, vowing never to return. But her voice recorder, which she had left in the sanatorium, still lies on the dusty floor of the building. And if anyone dares to listen to it now, they say it plays not just her screams, but the laughter of something inhuman. Story number 3. In the remote town of Hollow Creek, deep in the forests of rural Pennsylvania, there stood an old Victorian mansion that locals called the House of Whispers. It had been abandoned for decades, its windows broken like hollow eyes staring into the soul of anyone who dared to approach. The mansion had a reputation, rumors of screams during thunderstorms, of strange figures seen moving inside even though no one lived there. The townspeople kept their distance, warning outsiders to stay away. Rohan, a travel blogger from New York, arrived in Hollow Creek on a rainy October evening. He had heard tales of this haunted mansion from old newspaper clippings dating back to the 1950s, when a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances plagued the area. Locals at a roadside diner told him chilling stories. A waitress with trembling hands whispered, "That place doesn't just scare you, it takes you. No one who's gone in at night has come out the same. Rohan dismissed it as small-town superstition, eager for the kind of viral story his readers loved. That night, he set out for the mansion. The road leading there was narrow, cracked, and barely lit by the dim glow of the moon. His rental car sputtered and died just a mile away from the property, forcing him to walk the rest of the way. The air was unnaturally still, and the forest around him felt alive, as if watching him. The wrought iron gate of the mansion hung crooked on rusted hinges. As he pushed it, it let out a high-pitched scream. The house loomed ahead, tall, decayed, and suffocating in its silence. He stepped inside, his boots crunching on shattered glass and rotting wood. The smell of mildew and something metallic, almost like dried blood, hit him instantly. The hallway stretched before him, lined with faded portraits of stern-faced strangers. Their painted eyes seemed to follow him. He raised his flashlight, but it flickered even though the batteries were brand new. Then, from somewhere upstairs, he heard it, a faint whisper. It was so soft he almost thought it was the wind. But as he strained to listen, the whisper became clearer. It said his name. Rohan froze. His name echoed again, this time louder, as if spoken right next to his ear. He spun around, but no one was there. Panic clawed at his chest, but curiosity pushed him deeper into the house. He passed through a dining room where a long table sat covered in dust. The chairs were pulled out, as if the people who once dined there had left in a hurry. Cobwebs hung from a cracked chandelier. On the wall, a clock ticked, though no power was running in the house. The ticking grew louder, pounding like a heartbeat, until he realized it wasn't the clock, it was his own heart. The whispering returned, overlapping voices this time, some crying, some laughing, some screaming in agony. He clutched his flashlight tighter and tried to find his way back to the door, but the entrance was gone. Where there should have been the front hall, there was now a long, dark corridor that hadn't been there before. He stumbled into a room that looked like a child's nursery. A rocking horse swayed slowly, though no breeze stirred. On the wall were drawings in faded crayon. Houses, trees, stick figures. His eyes widened when he saw one stick figure with the word Rohan scrawled above it in a childlike hand. The whispers turned into cruel laughter. He backed toward the hallway, but froze when he saw her. At the end of the hall stood a woman in a tattered black dress. Her hair hung wet and matted over her face. She tilted her head unnaturally to one side, the sound of bones cracking as she did. Then, without moving her feet, she slid toward him, her face hidden until she stopped just inches away. When she lifted her head, her face was pale, hollow-eyed, and her jaw stretched far too wide, as if unhinged. Rohan bolted. He ran blindly through the corridors, each one twisting and stretching like the house itself was alive. Every door he opened revealed new horrors. A room of mannequins with cracked faces that all turned to look at him at once. A kitchen where rusty knives floated midair, slowly spinning. And a bathroom where the mirror showed not his reflection but a grinning version of himself, blood dripping from its mouth. He finally found a staircase and stumbled down into the basement. It was colder there, the air damp and suffocating. Candles burned in a perfect circle on the dirt floor, though no one was there to light them. In the center of the circle lay a blackened book, its pages covered in strange, hand-scratched symbols. As he bent down to pick it up, every candle blew out at once, and a whisper hissed in his ear, "You belong to us now." Suddenly, the woman in black appeared again, closer than ever. She reached for him with long, skeletal fingers. His flashlight died, plunging him into darkness. He could feel something wrapping around his throat, cold, strong, unrelenting. He screamed, but no sound came out. The next thing he knew, he was lying outside on the wet ground near the gate. The sun was rising over Hollow Creek. His throat burned as though invisible hands had choked him. When he stumbled to his feet and looked back, the mansion stood silently, its windows glinting in the morning light like nothing had happened. But Rohan knew. He could still hear the whispers, faint but constant, following him even as he left the town. That night, when he tried to sleep in his hotel room, he woke to find muddy footprints on the floor, leading from the door to his bed. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly, an ocean of lifeless sand beneath the pale, silver glow of the moon. The highway cut across it like a forgotten scar, empty and silent, with no signs of life for miles. Sarah and Daniel had been driving for hours, their car slicing through the darkness with only the thin beams of its headlights cutting through the night. They had left Los Angeles late, trying to make it home to Denver before dawn, but somewhere between the endless miles of cracked asphalt and the unforgiving desert, their luck ran dry. The fuel gauge had been unreliable for months, and Daniel, too stubborn to stop for gas earlier, insisted they could make it to the next station. But as the engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere, Sarah felt the weight of unease settle in her chest. The road was deserted. No cars had passed them for nearly an hour. The only sound was the hot desert wind whistling across the highway, carrying with it a strange, hollow moan that felt almost human. Then Sarah saw it. A flickering neon glow in the distance, faint at first, like a mirage. As they got closer, the letters became visible. Redwood Motel. Vacancy. The sign buzzed and crackled, some of its bulbs long dead. The word Redwood, hanging half-lit in red, like a bleeding wound in the night. The parking lot was empty. The asphalt was cracked and scattered with weeds, the place looking like it hadn't seen real visitors in years. Daniel parked their car near the entrance, and they stepped out, their footsteps crunching on gravel. The silence of the desert felt heavier here, almost pressing against their ears. The motel's front office had a single yellow bulb glowing inside. Daniel pushed the door open, and a small bell above it jingled. Behind the counter sat an old guest register, dusty and untouched, next to a cracked bell. Daniel rang it once. The metallic sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. From a back room, a man emerged. His skin was pale and waxy, stretched tight across his bones. He wore an old motel uniform that looked like it hadn't been washed in years. His smile was wrong. It was too wide, and it didn't reach his dark, hollow eyes. "Room 6, the man said, his voice soft but strained, like someone who had forgotten how to talk. He slid a tarnished brass key across the counter without asking for their names or any payment. Sarah, unsettled, leaned close to Daniel and whispered, "This place doesn't feel right." But Daniel, tired and annoyed, just shrugged. The room was worse than they expected. The wallpaper was peeling, stained with watermarks, and the carpet was so threadbare it revealed the floorboards beneath in places. A single lamp sat crooked on a small wooden nightstand, casting a dim, sickly light. The quilt on the bed looked heavy and damp, as if it had absorbed decades of dust and sweat. Sarah didn't want to touch anything. "This is just for one night," Daniel reassured her, though his own voice betrayed a hint of unease. "We'll get up early, find a gas station, and get out of here." The night begins. Sarah couldn't sleep. The desert was too quiet. The thin walls of the motel felt like they were listening, holding their breath. At some point, she thought she heard footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps, out in the hallway. At first, she told herself it was just another guest, but the motel parking lot had been empty. She lay still, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside their door. Then came a knock. Her breath caught in her throat. She nudged Daniel awake. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Daniel, half asleep, groggily got out of bed and looked through the peephole. "There's no one there," he said, confused. But just as he turned away, the door handle rattled violently, as if someone was trying to get in. Daniel froze. The rattling stopped as suddenly as it started. Heart pounding, Sarah whispered, "We should leave. I don't care if the car's empty. I'll walk." Daniel hesitated but shook his head. "It's probably just the wind," he said, though even he didn't sound convinced. The motel turned strange at 3:13 a.m. Sarah woke again. But this time the sound wasn't footsteps. It was humming, a low, tuneless hum coming from the hallway. She sat up, her skin crawling. The humming grew louder, almost as if it was circling their room. Daniel grabbed the lamp and yanked it closer to the door, but as he did, the light flickered. For a split second, Sarah swore she saw a shadow pass across the thin gap under the door, bare feet, standing still, facing their room. Then silence. Suddenly, their phone rang. It was the old motel phone on the nightstand, covered in dust. Daniel answered it, but there was nothing but static. Then, faintly, a voice whispered on the line, "Get out. Now." The phone went dead. Daniel looked at Sarah, his face pale. "We're leaving." The hallway, they grabbed their things and opened the door to the hallway. It was dark except for a single flickering light bulb at the far end. The air smelled of something foul, like wet metal and rot. As they walked, Sarah noticed the room doors. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3. Each one had deep scratches near the handle, as if someone or something had clawed at them. As they neared the front office, they saw the pale motel clerk standing in the hallway, blocking the exit. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, his neck bending too far to the left. His lips curled into that same wide, unnatural smile. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. His voice cracked like dry wood. Daniel stepped forward, ready to push past, but the man didn't move. Instead, the lights went out, plunging the hallway into complete darkness. Then came the whispers, dozens of them, surrounding them, coming from every wall, every corner. Sarah screamed, fumbling for her phone flashlight. When she turned it on, the motel clerk was gone. The desert trap, they ran to their car, breathing hard, fumbling with the keys. Daniel turned the ignition. Nothing. The engine was dead. It had been working when they arrived, but now it was as silent as the desert. Then, in the motel windows behind them, they saw movement. Dozens of figures standing in the darkened rooms, watching. Some pressed their hands against the glass, faces pale and twisted. Sarah screamed, "Drive!" Daniel slammed the keys again and again, but the car wouldn't start. Then, suddenly, the headlights flickered on by themselves. In their glow, Sarah saw a woman standing in the parking lot. Her dress was torn and soaked, her head tilted back unnaturally, her jaw hanging open in a silent scream. She started walking toward them, slowly, each step jerking like a broken puppet. The endless highway panicked. Daniel finally got the car to start. He sped down the highway, tires screeching on gravel. They didn't look back. But after 10 minutes of driving, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Up ahead, glowing faintly in the dark, was the same neon sign. Redwood Motel. Vacancy. Daniel slammed the brakes, his hands trembling. "We just left this place," he whispered. Sarah looked out the window. In the parking lot of the motel stood the same pale clerk, smiling, as if he had been waiting for them. The vanishing, what happened after that? No one really knows. Days later, a highway patrol officer found their rental car abandoned on the side of the road. Keys still in the ignition, both doors wide open. There was no trace of Sarah or Daniel. The only clue was the motel key lying on the front seat. Room 6. But when officers searched the area, they found no sign of any Redwood Motel. Locals insist that motel hasn't existed for over 40 years, not since a fire claimed the lives of every guest and staff member inside. They say that if you're unlucky enough to run out of gas on Highway 50, the motel appears to you. And if you check in, you'll never leave. The lights in Wood FOS to the town of Wood, nestled deep in the forests of Oregon, had always been shrouded in rumors. Hunters spoke of strange lights flickering between the trees late at night. Hikers claimed to hear whispers even when they were alone. Some locals believed the forest was alive, feeding off fear, trapping souls of those who dared to wander too far inside. Mara, a young photojournalist from Portland, didn't believe in such things. She was known for chasing eerie stories and exposing them as myths, turning urban legends into viral content. When she heard about Ashwood Forest and its so-called lights of the lost, she packed her camera, her tripod, and a flashlight, determined to spend a night in the woods and uncover the truth. The first signs Mara arrived at the edge of Ashwood Forest just before dusk. The trees were dense and towered above her like silent giants. The locals had warned her not to enter after dark, but she laughed it off. Fear makes people see what they want to see. She told herself that as she hiked deeper into the woods, she found remnants of old campsites, rusty fire pits, broken tents, and scattered belongings that looked decades old. The forest floor was littered with leaves that crunched under her boots. The sun dipped behind the horizon, and the world turned gray. By the time she set up her small camp, night had swallowed the forest. Mara lit a lantern, its warm glow barely pushing back the suffocating darkness. Then she saw it, just for a moment. A faint, glowing orb of light drifting between the trees, about 30 yards away. At first, she thought it was a trick of her tired eyes, or maybe someone else camping nearby. But as she stared, the light pulsed like a heartbeat. She grabbed her camera and zoomed in. Nothing. The light had vanished. The whispers begin around midnight. Mara awoke to the sound of soft whispers outside her tent. At first, she thought it was the wind through the trees, but then she heard her name. Mara. Mara. Her blood ran cold. She unzipped the tent, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing. Just the tall, silent trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, to her right, the glowing light returned. It hovered in the air, closer this time, bobbing slightly like it was beckoning her. Without thinking, she followed it, camera in hand, recording every step. The deeper she went, the more lights appeared. Small glowing orbs, white, blue, and pale green, floating silently between the trees. They moved slowly, leading her like breadcrumbs. Mara felt an odd pull toward them, as if they were alive, guiding her somewhere. The clearing, after what felt like hours of walking, she stumbled into a large clearing. At its center stood the ruins of an old cabin, its roof half collapsed, its windows shattered. The orbs circled above it like fireflies in slow motion. Inside, the cabin smelled of damp wood and rot. On the walls, strange symbols were carved, some so deep they looked burned into the wood. In the corner sat a rocking chair, gently moving back and forth on its own. Damara's camera caught something then, a shadow, fleeting and tall, moving across the cabin doorway behind her. She spun around. No one was there. The whispers grew louder now, coming from all around her. Some voices were crying. Others were laughing, soft and hollow. One voice, deep and sharp, whispered directly into her ear, "You shouldn't have come." The forest awakens panicked. Mara ran out of the cabin, her flashlight beam swinging wildly. The path she had come from was gone. The forest had changed. Trees seemed closer together, their branches like skeletal arms blocking her way. The glowing lights followed her, circling around her like predators. She tripped and fell, her camera shattering on a rock. In the silence that followed, she heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the darkness. Mara, the voice was not human. It was low, guttural, like something imitating human speech. She pointed her flashlight, and for a split second, she saw it dot a figure. Tall, impossibly thin, with limbs too long to be natural. Its skin was gray and stretched tight over its bones, its eyes two hollow pits glowing faintly like the orbs. It tilted its head at her, and when it smiled, its mouth stretched far too wide. Mara screamed and ran. The endless night, no matter which way she turned, the forest didn't end. Her flashlight began to flicker. Her watch said 2 a.m., but it felt like she had been running for days. Every time she stopped to catch her breath, she heard branches snapping behind her, as if something was following, always just out of sight. She found another clearing, this one filled with old, rusted items, lanterns, coats, shoes. All of them looked abandoned, as if their owners had simply vanished. At the center was a tree, its bark carved with hundreds of names. As she stepped closer, her heart stopped. Her name was already there. Mara Evans. Freshly carved, the wood still damp. The final hour by 3 a.m., the lights had surrounded her. They hovered silently, watching, pulsing like a heartbeat. Mara fell to her knees, trembling. The tall figure emerged from the trees again, closer this time, its glowing eyes fixed on her. You belong to the forest now, it whispered, though its mouth never moved. She tried to run one last time, but the ground beneath her feet felt like it was sinking, the earth soft and pulling her down. The last thing she saw before she was consumed by darkness were the lights, all of them converging, blinding her. The aftermath 3 weeks later, hikers found Mara's camp. Her tent was torn, her lantern broken. Her camera was recovered, its final footage showing only her terrified face, whispering, "The lights are watching me." No one ever found her body. Locals say if you enter Ashwood Forest at night, you might see glowing orbs among the trees. If you do, don't follow them, because once the lights find you, they never let you leave.